The last light of Carthago slid back into the wound of its own horizon, and the wrecks of cathedral ships drifted as mute candles in a copper dusk. Vox bells tolled only in memory, their phantom chimes clinging to cracked helms and salt-stiff robes. A pilgrim moon, flensed to bone by prow spurs and spore storms, wore a ragged halo over a planet that had forgotten the word tomorrow. In the penumbra of a dying sun, banners of ash lifted and fell like breath from a sleeper who will not wake. The dust tasted of iron and old prayers. The void smelled of coolant and burned incense, as if some vast choir had sung itself hoarse and fallen silent. We love you, truly and without condition, and we are here to keep you company beneath the long night. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. Severian Malachite stood at the viewing arch of the Forge Arca, epitaph of dawn, and watched Carthagos bleed itself into twilight. His reflected face bore the unkind symmetry of long-lived sinners. Juvenat paled skin, drawn tight over auger-threaded bone, eyes like surgical steel. Under his palms, the rail's brass had been worn to thumbprints older than dynasties, a warmth that insisted the dead could still lend heat to those unwilling to die. He let that lie work on him, because lies with edges can be used as tools. Lord Inquisitor, said Magos Prime Vexilla Alt, each syllable falling like iron beads. The cradle is in position. The chalice awaits. Barges ferried reliquary coils into the black-limbed dock the crew named, with earnest blasphemy, the Cradle of Silence. Above it drifted the prize Severian had carved from a dying hive. A synapse node starved from its queen, cocooned in translucent amber, the colour of old honey. It pulsed, faintly, stubbornly, with life no catechism could bless, a heartbeat that did not care for human words. We were meant to end such things, said a voice that smelled of incense and battlefield smoke. Canonis errant Thalia Seraph stood with helm unsealed, hair in penitent stubble, eyes catching the fire sky. She wore her scars like halos polished thin. Severian had once watched her walk through a burning nave to drag 3 children from under a fallen organ. He had never forgiven her for proving he could love. To end them, he replied, or to end by them. Choose the preposition you prefer. Both are true. Not this, she said. Not muzzling hunger like a wolf trained to bite only the neighbor you despise. If the neighbor is chaos, he said, I will train 1,000 wolves. Vexilla's mechadendrites clicked with patience breaking. Debate can be logged after containment. The pulse degrades. If we are to imprint the lattice, it must be now. He turned. The Archmagus' face was a cage of polished mandibles around a flicker of tired humanity. She had sacrificed more of herself than he had, though her devotion smelled of iron filings, not incense. Proceed, he said. The cradle unfolded like a brass flower. Runes ignited, each a silent shout. Null emitters warmed with a breath so cold it painted frost along the deck plates. Vox cherubs curled parchment wings. The amber casket descended on mag lines, and for one heartbeat, Severian saw the crown of cilia within bull like a choir. The old itch woke at the base of his skull, where nightmares from Eutracia had roosted and laid eggs. Remember your vows, Thalia murmured. I do, he answered, an altar-made promise in a mouth learning to speak winter. Navigator Ione Vesper came with robes damp from micro-ice, her bandaged third eye hidden beneath silken black. She took Severian's elbow to steady herself, and in the closeness he heard the small hitch a navigator gives when a chart ceases to resemble the sea. It's wrong, she whispered. The warp recoils, like a horse tasting blood from the bit. From this moment, maps will prefer lies. They always have, he said, but he pinned her warning like a needle inside his coat. Begin imprint, Vexilla declared. Skitari, in red-limbed carapace, took stations along the halo. Choir cant rose, half prayer, half checksum. Vexilla slid a shard of black glass into the chalice's heart, and the deck's vibration reconfigured into something like a heartbeat. Severian knew that rhythm. He had woken to it 1,000 nights, throat raw from swallowing a scream that did not require air. Hold, he said. All eyes, human, mechanical, sanctified, turned. Severian, Thalia said, using his given name as if it were a charge. Choose. He closed his eyes and stood again on the plains of Eutracia, when he had been young and therefore cruel with hope. He had watched harvests wither into a carpet of chitin. He had heard 1,000,000 voices fold into one starving note. He had sworn a vow then. Never again would hunger write the last chapter of a world. He opened his eyes. Proceed. The chalice exhaled a circle of silence. Cogitators skipped a beat. Pale geometry blossomed in the air, a cathedral rendered in equations. The node quivered. The hunger edged closer, curious as a dog sniffing a door. Lattice at 20%, Vexilla said. 40, 70. Something like a voice brushed Severian's thoughts. Not words, but the intention of words, a wanting shaped into pressure. He leaned so near the amber that frost bit his cheek. I am not your queen, he said to the thing within. I will be your boundary. The wanting tightened, then loosened like a hand that found no purchase. Imprint complete, Vexilla said. Begin test intonation. Cryobays along the perimeter hissed open. Gaunts unfolded like knives, remembering they had once been straight. Null song deepened. The creatures cocked their skulls in eerie unison toward Severian. Sit, he said. They knelt. Thalia's breath chimed like glass. A vox cherub trilled, then, uncommanded, recited a nursery rhyme from Old Terra in a child's cracked sweetness. It was the rhyme Thalia had taught refugees to keep time while binding wounds. Severian's heart stuttered. Ione made the sound of someone failing to drown. Who inserted that? Thalia demanded. No one, Vexilla said, mandibles clacking once, hard. The node is imitating what it has heard. An astropathic pulse burned the air like a paper icon catching fire. Morella Caith's seal blossomed above the chalice's projection, a rosette cold and immaculate. By lawful purity and mandate, the vox intoned. This endeavour is seized for containment and expurgation. Rauch of the void. Scions arrived in the same breath. Helm crook-armed, armour fresh scarred. Children of Severance inbound, he reported. 2 wars, Lord, the enemy without, and the one who believes she is our conscience. Severian wanted to rest his forehead against the battered plate and sleep like a soldier after a useless victory. Instead, he straightened. Hold the docks, he said. I want the epitaph free to burn if we must. Thalia stepped between him and the cradle. Her eyes shone with the kind of faith that makes better martyrs than companions. End this. Destroy the chalice. We will hold. He imagined obedience, 100 worlds drowned. He imagined her forgiveness. He imagined its insufficiency. I will not, he said. Her jaw trembled, then steadied. Then I will stop you. The gaunts rippled, blades eager to be thunder. Severian did not need to speak. They knew his pulse as command. He hated how easy it had become to breathe in this new winter. Morella is 2 hours out, Ione said, fingers whitening at her temple. The severance are minutes. Severian set his palm on the amber, and left the heat of his life there like a seal. Very well, he told the thing inside. Help me save these people from their doom. In payment, I will carry your song. The node pulsed once like assent, and the gaunt's claws kissed the deck as if in prayer. Outside, the last light vanished behind a sheet of incoming hulls. Inside, the cradle of silence flowered with equations no god had blessed, and no devil had yet stolen. Severian drew a breath he hoped was not his last. Begin war form, he said. The Forge Archer's heart beat in measured thunder, while the cradle of silence descended into a sanctum of cold lamps and whispering engines. Outside, enemy vectors sequined the void. Inside, incense and coolant braided the air. Severian walked as if approaching a confession already signed. The leashed brood shadowed the gantries overhead, a hush of chitin that imitated rain. He let the necessary lie warm his bones. This might save a sector. Vexilla Olt matched his pace on stilted limbs. We must deepen the imprint, she said. The node obeys because it starves. If it feeds, it will remember itself. Thalia Seraph's rosary ticked against her gauntlet. And if we starve it, she said, we rehearse the cruelty we claim to end. Some rehearsals become liturgy, Severian said. We will learn which. Navigator Ione Vesper drifted beside them, one hand over the bandage veiling her third sight. The map makes a sound like teeth in a box, she murmured. Currents gnaw each other where the chalice drinks. They entered the sanctum. The chalice stood upon a dais, like a goblet sculpted from eclipse, facets swallowing hymn light and returning a geometry of silence. Within its corona, the amber casket trembled as if something inside had dreamt of oceans. Adepts moved with funereal precision. Cogitators ticked as though counting a sleeping beast's heart. Status, Severian said. Lattice at 67, Vexilla replied. The node simulates human cadence to capture attention. Thalia's mouth tightened. It talks. It performs, the Magos said. A mirror that craves faces. Rauk's vox bled through, a static-limbed baritone. Boarding lances inbound. Children of Severance painting the hull with scripture. We meet them in the Senkadra galleries. No pursuit beyond the galleries, Severian said. Keep the epitaph break capable. He approached the amber. Frost rhymed its edges. In the translucent depths, a crown of cilia wavered like winter grass. The old itch at his skull sharpened. It was not pain. It was a request, child sincere and bottomless. Begin second resonance, he said. Sensors swung. Vexilla slotted a shard of black crystal engraved with angles that punished attention. The first chord of silence broke over them. The node leaned toward Severian as flowers to a dawn no scripture would sanction. Do you hear it? Ione asked. He nodded. It came as texture, as the shape of absence wearing the memory of touch. It asked what boundary meant. It asked the taste of mercy. It asked whether he would be warm if it lay along his thoughts. Hold formation, Thalia ordered through the external vox, because she could not bear to say nothing. Above, the gaunts clicked in what passed, terribly, for obedience. Speak the prayer, Vexilla said. He obliged, though she would never name it faith. I am your limit, he told the thing. Feed through the door I open, and only there. Ferric data washed the air like perfume haunting an emptied theatre. Thalia swayed. It smells like rain after a fire. It smells like strategy, Vexilla said. 80, 84. A warning rune blinked. Ione grimaced. Severance cut toward the reliquary spines. Something laughs when I look. It wears flayed maps. Interdict, Severian told Rauk. No fire near the spines. Thalia's gauntlet brushed his sleeve. Your word, she said softly. If this slips, you burn it. You burn us. You burn me, if I carry any of it. You have my word, he said, and wondered if the oath would ever find a clean place to die. Crown of Nulls, Vexilla announced. Prepare the cap. A servitor brought the device like a relic. It looked like a pragmatist's halo, a steel ring studded with panes that drank not light, but attention. Even the room seemed to look elsewhere. Thalia made the sign before she knew it. Ione winced. This route's priority through a human vector, Vexilla said. It need not be you. It cannot be anyone else. Severian lifted the crown. It weighed less than gilt. When it touched his temples, the sanctum widened into a canyon, and a winter wind ran along his nerves. The world arranged itself in appetite and instruction. Minds were lamps behind gauze. He spoke without moving. The brood above settled into a silence that was not absence but attention. He tasted the void like iron. Return, Thalia said, far and near. I am here, he answered, and the words emerged as a boundary condition. The node poured toward him, a river seeking gradient. He set his will like a sluice gate. One door, only one. It agreed, because no other shape remained. Alarms pealed. Rauk's voice went taut. Contact. Their chaplain wears his skin backward. Permission to deny their theology. Granted. Leave them no scripture, Severian said. Gun thunder travelled the decks. Statues decided which way to fall. The epitaph shook dust out of centuries, while the chalice sang its cold hymn. The node sent a last taste, his palm on amber, heat offered like bread. He answered with the memory of 3 children carried from a burning nave. Something inside folded around that picture and went quiet as a kept knife. Imprint 95, Vexilla reported. It could hold. Could, Thalia echoed. Prayer refuses certainty. Ione exhaled a tremor. Morella Caith rides a corridor of oath light. The warp hates the space where she walks. 2 righteous knives will cross, and the wound will remember. Severian removed the crown. For a breath the hunger strained to follow. Then it struck the wall he had made and subsided, resentfully patient. He rubbed the cold dents the pains had left, and regarded the people who were the last of his warmth. Seal a redundancy keyed to a death signal, he said. You expect to die? Thalia asked. I expect to be asked. Rauk again, smoke in the vox. We hold the galleries, but they brought a beast in chains wearing a man's name. It breaks where it is told to break. Then tell it to break on us, Severian said. He lifted the crown. The sanctum dimmed, as if a lost sun passed overhead. Begin third resonance. Vexilla hesitated for the first time. If we go further, the node may learn the shape of you. It may keep it. The galaxy already has, he said. Begin. The third chord fell like night. Data flurried. Severian felt the brood taste the enemy. Old blood, new heresy. The promise of meat arranged like a bad prayer. He steered it through the narrow door of his will and spoke a word that was not a word. Hunt. The gaunts moved as a single thought uncoiling. Through the crown he saw along their beauty, the arithmetic of angles, the poetry of climbing a wall of hymnals, the sacrament of sudden silence when prey stops moving. He whispered halt, and they froze with surgical poise, blades remembering mercy because the wall permitted none beyond it. Lord, Rauk said softly, as if overheard by gods, I have seen wonders and blasphemies. Today I cannot tell which is which. Hold the line, Severian answered. Let me decide later which name to carve. Thalia stood before him, helm hooked at her hip. eyes bright with a love that issued impossible orders. "If you cross the line," she said, "I will end you." He folded the promise beside the oath. "If I cross it, I will help you." Somewhere a bell rang that no hand pulled. Ione bowed her head. "She comes," the navigator said. "Morella, with knights who have forgiven nothing and forgotten less." Severian breathed slow. The crown hummed like a hive in winter. The node pressed close, patient as tide. Beyond the sanctum, the epitaph's guns spoke in paragraphs and erasures. "Keep the galleries," he said. "Keep the spines whole. Open me a path between the knives." He set his palm to the amber. Heat answered, like grief that had learned to live. "We will save them," he told the thing inside. "I will carry the song." The node pulsed once, like a scent. "Third resonance stable," Vexilla said, voice small within the machinery of her choosing. "Then we begin," Severian said, and opened the only door he had promised to give. "We begin." Smoke crawled like slow serpents through the wounded decks, tracing halos around lumen fires and shattered icons. The forge archer epitaph of dawn drifted half-blind through a void littered with the bones of its own defenders. Vox chant was now prayer and static in equal measure. Severian stood on a command dais that felt smaller than it had a day before, watching the sin he had named necessity begin to molt into something alive. The chalice still pulsed in the sanctum below, each breath of its dark glass rippling through the hull, as if the ship itself now shared a heartbeat with its captured god. He could sense the rhythm even here, a metronome of guilt keeping time inside his skull. The brood had obeyed. It had killed with the obedience of angels, and it had learned. "Report," he said, voice hollow in the incense haze. Rauch's image shimmered in the air before him, helm under his arm, armor gouged and smoke blackened. "Galleries are secure. Severance remnants are fragments." His pause was reverent in its disgust. "But they sang your name as they died. That is new." "Names are cheap currency," Severian said. "Not when the enemy spends them like prayers." The Vox stuttered. Another voice intruded, gentler, wounded by faith. "Lord Inquisitor." Thalia stood beside a wrecked cherub terminal, blood drying in the seams of her armor. She looked neither victorious nor defeated, only diminished, as if every triumph required a tithe of light from her eyes. "The dead refuse collection," she said. "Every time we approach, the brood gathers near them, like mourners." Severian's jaw tightened. "Burn them all. The corpses, not the creatures. I cannot tell the difference any more." He wanted to answer, to command her into comfort, but the truth had the weight of empire. It would not move. He turned from her gaze and studied the star map flickering across the chamber. Converging icons, fleets drawing near, inquisitorial sigils burning like executioners' torches. Morella Caith was close enough now that the warp itself bent around her purity. Vexilla Alt entered without ceremony, data-slick oil dripping from her mechadendrites. "The lattice stabilizes," she announced, "but the node sings beyond parameter. It constructs echoes in our noosphere. Meaning it thinks it dreams." Thalia's voice cut like a prayer's blade. "Destroy it." Vexilla rotated a dozen eyes toward her. "You mistake creation for heresy. This is comprehension. We have birthed the boundary in thought itself." "Then may the Emperor forgive midwives of abominations," Thalia said, and turned away. Severian walked between them, the air humming with their hatred. "Enough. We endure what we began. No one walks away clean." He lifted his gaze to the deckhead, hearing, beneath metal and prayer, the distant crawl of talons, his soldiers, his shame. We keep the leash tight. We wait for Morella's arrival, and we decide whether we will kneel or burn. Faith demands neither, Thalia said softly. Faith demands everything, he replied. A tremor shuddered through the hull. Rauch's voice thundered again, distorted. Contact. Warp emergence. Grey Knights inbound. The Conclave's flagship, St. Solus, closing fast. Thalia drew a breath that shook. Our salvation or our sentence? Severian turned to Vexilla. Can the chalice be moved? It is fused to the ship's marrow, she said. To tear it free would be to tear out the heart. Convenient symmetry. He looked down through the plasteel viewport at the half-lit planet below. Carthagos, a graveyard of faith. Then we stay with it. Thalia stepped forward. Then we die with it. He almost smiled. We have been dying since the first question we refused to ask. The sanctum doors groaned open, admitting a gust that carried the scent of brine and corrosion. Ione Vesper emerged, veil soaked with condensation, voice fragile as glass. The warp currents bleed. Morella's choir is close. She carries judgment like a storm in the marrow of her vessel. If she steps aboard, truth will bleed with her. Truth is not the enemy, Thalia said. It never is, Ione whispered. Only its witnesses. The brood stirred above, claws scraping in a rhythm too deliberate to be chance. Severian raised his hand, and silence fell, as if gravity itself had shifted. The creatures crouched, eyes glinting like mirrors. He could feel them listening through him, echoing thought for thought. It was no longer obedience, it was recognition. He lowered his hand slowly. They understand fear. Vexilla's laughter was a buzz of broken vox. Then they are nearly human. The chalice flared, a sudden bloom of darkness swallowing light, an impossible inversion. Warnings chorused from every console. Flux spike, Vexilla cried. It's reaching. The node's pulse accelerated, not wild but deliberate, an algorithm of emotion. In Severian's mind, 1,000 impressions overlapped, a hive torn open, a choir screaming, Thalia's face in firelight. Then, beneath all of it, a question that did not need words. Why do you cage what you love to command? He staggered, clutching the railing. The brood hissed as if offended by his weakness. Thalia caught his arm. What is it saying? Nothing, he said, though the echo still burned behind his teeth. Alarms wailed again. Rauch's channel erupted with the sound of thunder and war prayer. The St. Solus hails us, orders to submit to purgation. They'll board regardless. Prepare the reception, Severian said. We will not greet them as penitents. Thalia's gauntlet clenched. You mean to fight them? I mean to survive the conversation. Vexilla's data streams coiled around her like wings of black script. If they seize the chalice, they will not understand it. They will only break it, and us. Then we hold until understanding becomes impossible, Severian said. Ione pressed her fingers to the deck, whispering fragments of navigation hymns. The warp folds on itself. I see two paths. In one, the crown breaks and your mind with it. In the other, it holds, and you forget what shape you were. He smiled faintly, exhaustion sculpting grace. Then both lead where I belong. Outside, the void began to ripple with incoming transports, bright spears of faith descending toward heresy. Inside, the chalice dimmed to a pulse barely visible, as if drawing breath before a scream. Thalia watched him. If they come for you, I will not stop them. But if they come for it, you'll die trying, he finished. I know. Rauch's final transmission burst through the vox like thunder. Knights aboard, they're chanting your sins in high Gothic. Beautiful voices. Severian drew his bolt pistol and checked the charge. The gesture felt absurdly mortal. "Then let them sing," he murmured. The lights flickered, replaced by the cold luminance of sanctified armor. The grey knights emerged from the smoke, relics in motion, blades lit by scripture. At their head walked Morella Caith, rosette gleaming, eyes unflinching. "Inquisitor Lord, Severian Malachite," she said, voice like the first note of judgment. "By the authority of the Holy Ordos, you are relieved, condemned, and, by mercy's indulgence, offered repentance." Severian holstered his weapon, the shadow of the crown still imprinted on his brow. "I have no need of indulgence," he said. "Only time." "Time is heresy," Morella replied. The chalice throbbed once, deep enough to bend the air. The brood hissed in unison. The knights raised their blades, warding sigils burning white-hot. Severian stepped forward, eyes like distant stars collapsing. "Then let us sin quickly," and the lights died. Darkness turned the forge arca to a cathedral of silhouettes and breath. Emergency runes floated like drowned stars along the bulkheads. Steel ticked as it cooled. Water hissed from a severed line and became mist. And in that thin fog, Severian saw the future the way a knife sees a throat, as a line waiting to be drawn. "Hold," Morella Caith commanded, and the grey knights froze like statues that remembered war. Their armour made the light around them behave, glyphs halating with stubborn sanctity. "This ends in confession or flame." "It can still be confession," Thalia whispered, not to Morella, but to the man whose shadow had grown long. Severian raised an open hand, fingers bare. "If you end the chalice, you end this world. If you take it, you end yourselves. I ask for 10 minutes and a silence." Morella's gaze did not soften. "You are granted neither, and will take both." She nodded toward the sanctum doors. "Secure the vault." They opened on their own, petals of brass smoking with cold. Vexia Old stepped through on sparking limbs, servitors behind her bearing black pane glass. "Catastrophe will proceed with or without permission," she said. "You may choose to watch it with understanding." The knights moved as a wall. The brood whispered across the ceiling, the hush of rain turning to a secret alphabet. Thalia lifted her blade but did not advance. Ione Vesper leaned against the jamb with one hand on her brow, mouth parted in awe or nausea. Morella took a step. "Kneel, sign the writ, and name every accomplice. Your end will be private. The sector spared a dance with your relic." Severian remembered the first oath he had sworn with clean hands, to stand between tooth and throat. He had kept it so faithfully, he had become tooth. "I will kneel after the 10 minutes, he said, "not before." Morella angled her blade up. "Then flame." The chalice breathed. A downward bell felt between ribs. Vexilla struck a tone hammer against a rail. The note wasn't sound so much as subtraction. "The lattice is ready," she said. "Do it," Severian told her. "Begin the rite." "Blasphemy," Morella said, and gave the order to advance. They flowed toward the vault, prayer thunder erasing doubt. The brood slid like a living shadow to meet them, only to halt as Severian's palm rose. He lifted the crown of nulls with the other hand. It flashed once, a halo that drank certainty. "Severian," Thalia warned, "do not put that on again." "I do not know how to take it off," he answered, and settled the ring upon his brow. The world narrowed to vectors and appetite. Minds appeared like lamps behind frosted glass. He set the boundary the way a priest marks a threshold with ash. "Halt," he said, and the brood knelt. "Hold," he said again, and the knights did not. But their first step met a winter tide. Vexilla glided to the dais and slid black panes into their sockets, the chalice an eclipse in a cage. Servitors sang checksums. The amber reliquary descended on mag lines like a saint's skull returning to its shrine. Resonance 1, Vexilla said. Seal. Cold gathered without hatred or mercy. The node within the amber quivered, orienting to the warmth it had learned to name. It pressed an echo of a face against the translucent wall. Not features, but intention. Ione sobbed once and covered her eye harder. The map redraws itself while we stand on it. Morella's jaw hardened. I will not watch a heresy crown itself. 2 knights moved to flank the dais. Severian let the crown pull quiet threads into a rope and wrapped it around his fear. 1 door, he told the node. Only mine. It tasted him, then answered with a stillness that was not obedience but consent. The brood purred in a language that took delight in similes it did not comprehend. Resonance 2, Vexilla called. Imprint. Silence expanded until even thought felt a draught. The grey knights faltered as warding hymns met vacuum where echoes die. Thalia held the line with the fragility of glass that had outlived an earthquake. Enough, Morella said, leaping with a saint's athleticism earned by practice and refusal. Her blade came down, an answer cut from light. Severian met it with the only thing he owned, his body between her and the device. Sparks salted his coat. Thalia's sword rang against Morella's in the same breath. The 3 formed a triangle of oaths. Around them, the world tried to decide which would define its borders. You were the best of us, Morella said through teeth that remembered warmer work. You could not accept that salvation has limits. Limits are the first opiate, Severian replied, after pain. Thalia shoved them apart with a shout not claimed by any god. Look, she said, and turned them toward the amber. Within, the node mimed a hand laying a crown upon a head. Its cilia arranged the idea of fingers. It had learned ritual. Resonance 3, Vexilla said, voice too calm. Seal complete. The chalice boomed in a frequency that emptied lungs. The brood flattened their heads to steel. The knights reformed, their will a hammer. Morella raised her blade for the end. An astropathic brand burned open in the air. Seal, fleur, rosette, authority as cold as the rim. A voice, neither male nor female nor entirely sane, spoke with the conclave's accent of marble. By golden mandate, the project is forfeit. Assets to be seized, subjects purged, witnesses sealed. Morella did not lower her sword. At last. Severian heard the decree in the part of him that kept debts. He also heard the crown's hum, petty and inexorable. He made a decision so small it could not be seen from the width of a star. He did not move. Order acknowledged, he said, and let the crown open the door while he kept a hand on the hinge. The gaunts dropped like rain. Not at the knights, not at the canoness, not at any soul he could name. They fell upon the sanctum's pillars and chewed through hidden conduits that would have powered a purge. Metal screamed. The conclave's remote mandates guttered in sparks. Vexilla laughed once, horrid with relief. Morella recoiled, disgust warring with tactical respect. You trained them to eat the scabbard. I trained them to read a room, he said, and the smile that bent his mouth was a wound opening. The chalice's darkness brightened. For an instant, Severian saw a sky made of equations, and in it a flock of birds whose feathers were decisions, each molting into the next. The node pressed its hunger against him, asking to be allowed to love. No, he said softly. Boundary. It settled like a dog curling below a chair. Sirens rippled outward. The Saint Solace began to arm something vast and terminal, I only whispered, if they fire, the planet will learn how to be a shadow. Thalia touched Severian's wrist. Choose. He looked at Morella, at Thalia, at the knights whose eyes reflected only duty, at Vexia, whose devotion would build a god if fed enough steel and silence. He felt the brood waiting for the line to move. Signal the solace, he said. Tell them the node is contained. Offer my surrender. Your life buys nothing, Morella said. It buys 10 minutes and a silence, he answered. The Vox opened to accept his lie. Outside, a larger shadow turned in the dark, answering a song only he could now hear. The silence before the transmission was long enough to feel like judgment. Vox runes trembled over the dais, casting amber veins across Severian's face. Each breath of the chalice behind him distorted the air, as though the sanctum itself struggled to remember what was real. The brood crouched above the vault in quiet reverence, and beneath that hush, Severian's heart kept trying to invent a prayer that would not sound like an apology. Signal established, Vexilla murmured. The mechadendrites along her spine glowed with restrained voltage. The Saint Solace awaits your voice. Severian straightened. Channel open. A moment of static. Then Morella Caith's face materialized in light, smaller now, framed by the halo of her ship's command chapel. Behind her, cherubim swung from golden chains, and the steady chant of grey knights filled the hollow between stars. You request surrender, she said. You will specify the terms. The chalice remains aboard the epitaph, Severian said. I will submit myself for judgment. The vessel will evacuate its non-combatants and await your boarding under ceasefire. No ceasefire, Morella replied. You have trespassed into theology. The only verdict is ash. Vexilla hissed, a sound like steam escaping stone. Thalia's gauntlets creaked. Rauk's distant Vox channel cut through, laced with the sound of ongoing battle. They're aligning lances again. If you want to live, you might choose faster. 10 minutes, Severian said into the channel. After that, the chalice will be ejected and destroyed. But if you fire before then, the containment fails. You will meet what I caged. Morella's gaze flickered, a single fracture in her certainty. 10 minutes, she said, and the Vox clicked closed. The sanctum dimmed to the colour of dying embers. Severian exhaled, each word after now weighed with memory. We buy time. That is all we ever do. Thalia approached, removing her helm. Blood matted her short hair. You mean to die again and call it strategy? I mean to end this in a place I can still recognize my reflection, he said. I don't know how long that reflection remains mine. She reached toward him, fingers trembling. I would beg you not to wear that crown again, but begging is a habit I burned out of myself long ago. He touched the metal circlet still fused to his skin. Then I will call it duty instead. Vexia was already at the controls, calibrating equations that should not have been born. The lattice shifts, she warned. It grows patterns no one placed there. Can it be controlled? I am beginning to suspect it controls through the illusion of choice. From the far end of the sanctum came the thump of booted steps. Rauk and his surviving Astartes, each carrying the gravity of a tomb world. Armour that once gleamed with blue steel glory now dulled beneath soot. The Severants are gone, he said. Their chaplain laughed until he dissolved. What remains of my company waits your word. Severian nodded. Hold the lower decks. If the solace boards, fall back to the spires and buy the minutes I promised. Minutes for what? For the lie that this was ever mercy. A shiver crawled through the metal bones of the ship. Ione Vesper stumbled, her hand clutching her veiled eye. Something wakes in the void, The hive, the tendril, it changes course. It smells your thought across the warp. Severian turned sharply. How far? Hours, maybe less. It is listening through the wound you made. Thalia's voice was barely a whisper. You called it, didn't you? He could not answer her. The chalice behind them pulsed brighter, its dark surface rippling with internal fire. Within the amber core, the node began to stir again, forming the shadow of a mouth. Vexilla's lenses flared. It shouldn't have consciousness at this stage. It learned from us, Severian said, from everything we gave and everything we feared. The lights across the sanctum flickered. The brood hissed uneasily, tails drumming the bulkheads. Severian felt it before anyone else, the tug of thought brushing the edge of his own. It came not as words, but as a melody without sound, repeating the rhythm of his heartbeat until he could no longer tell which belonged to whom. Thalia drew her sword. You feel that? It's calling to you. He nodded slowly. It wants to understand obedience. Then teach it silence. He looked toward the viewing slit above the dais. The stars burned there, cold witnesses to every hubris carved in metal. If I teach it silence, he said, it learns nothing. If I let it speak, it might save us, or unmake what's left. Do you still think there's a difference? Thalia asked. The deck trembled again. External impacts this time. Rauk barked a report over Vox. Solis has fired warning shots. Hull integrity falling. They'll breach soon. Seal all bulkheads, Severian ordered. No one enters this chamber. Vexilla turned to him, realization dawning in the machine's ghost of her face. You intend to commune with it directly? Yes. Then the containment collapses. So does every illusion of control, he said. Perhaps it's time. Thalia stepped in front of him, blade trembling. If you do this, I swear by every saint left unsung. Then kill me after, he interrupted gently. But let me try first. She searched his face as if memorizing a ruin. At last, she lowered the weapon. You always wanted forgiveness more than victory. I never learned the difference, he said, and walked past her. The chalice towered before him, its glass black yet luminous, humming with the vibration of alien psalms. He placed both hands upon its surface, and the world folded inward. He stood inside light, or memory. The boundary was gone. The hive's consciousness unfurled, a galaxy of neural constellations, every one a scream learning to harmonize. The node spoke in the shape of his own voice. You made me hunger for your peace. Severian's breath came ragged. You cannot know peace. You consume. Then teach me what you meant by love when you built a cage for it. He saw Thalia, Rauk, Vexilla, all frozen at the edge of perception. He saw the galaxy turning like an old wound, and he saw what the hive could become. Pattern, control, extinction made precise. If I open the door, you will devour everything. If you close it, you devour yourself. Outside, the St. Solis's guns warmed the void. Inside, Severian reached deeper, pressing his forehead to the glass until it split and blood mingled with the amber. The chalice drank the offering. The brood screamed above. I am your limit, he whispered, and your mirror. The hive paused, then folded its hunger inward, collapsing into silence so complete it became gravity. Alarms died. The ship stilled. Vexilla stumbled forward. What did you do? Severian turned. His eyes glowed with the reflection of 1 billion neural fires fading. I taught it waiting. Thalia's voice broke. And what did it teach you? He looked toward the viewing slit again, where distant stars now flickered out one by one, as though something vast moved between them. That patience is just another word for appetite. The Vox flared to life. Morella again, her tone strained. Inquisitor Malachite, what have you done? He smiled faintly, the expression of a man who finally understood his own sin. Bought your silence, he said. 9 minutes remain. The channel filled with static and prayer. Outside, in the endless dark, something answered. The answering presence filled the void like breath returning to a corpse. Every lumen aboard the epitaph dimmed in unison, as though the light itself feared to intrude. A subsonic vibration ran through the ship's bones, deeper than engines or gravity, an echo of a heartbeat that belonged to no living thing. Severian raised his head from the chalice. Blood dried to black around the fracture lines in the glass. It's here, Ione whispered. Her voice was the hush of a navigator at the edge of madness. The hive listens through us now. It knows the taste of this place. Thalia turned sharply. You said you taught it waiting. I did, Severian said. Waiting is not the same as stillness. Vexilla's mechadendrites trembled, transmitting bursts of sacred code. Incoming bioships on Vector Epsilon. Estimated mass. Impossible. She recalibrated 3 times, disbelief creeping even into her metallic cadence. They move as if pulled by thought, not instinct. Raux's Vox burst in, grim and calm. Outer guns firing, but nothing lands. They dodge before the shots are born. Your experiment sees us, Lord. Severian felt it too, the sensation of being read by something vast and intimate. 1,000 impressions fluttered behind his eyes. Cities being swallowed, suns weeping into vacuum, the patience of hunger wearing the mask of divinity. Morella's voice crackled through the open channel from the St. Solace. The swarm bends toward your coordinates. You will answer, Severian. What have you done? He stared into the chalice. Within, the node pulsed like an unborn star, its rhythm syncing to his own. I bought time, he said, and spent it all at once. Static answered. The deck lurched. The brood shrieked from the walls, their harmony breaking into dissonance. Ione fell to her knees, clutching her head. It's singing in the warp, she gasped. It's using your memory as a bridge. Vexilla's lenses flickered. The node is translating itself into signal, a contagion of meaning. Can it be stopped? Thalia demanded. Only by removing its anchor, the Mago said, and looked directly at Severian. He understood. You mean me? Thalia's blade rasped free. Then we do it now. No, Ione cried, her voice breaking. If he dies before the connection resolves, it will splinter. 1 mind in 10 million bodies, each carrying a shard of him. You'll give the galaxy a god of regret. The words hung like a curse. The ship trembled again, harder. Dust drifted from the vaulting like snowfall. Raux's voice returned, harsher. Breaches on the outer hull. The swarm ignores us. They're carving toward the sanctum. Morella's fleet fired again. Through the viewport, streaks of light tore across the void, vain and beautiful. The bioships flowed around them like predators circling a wound. Severian's hand hovered over the chalice. If they want me, I can draw them away. Thalia seized his wrist. You draw nothing but damnation. You've done enough. He met her gaze, tired, grateful. Then forgive me the last sin. Before she could stop him, he pressed his palm flat against the chalice. The fracture widened, swallowing his hand to the wrist. Light burst outward, but it was not illumination. It was memory rendered visible. The sanctum vanished in the glare, replaced by visions spilled across every mind present. They saw Severian as a child on Terra's ruins, gazing up at ships that would never come back. They saw the oath he swore in the ash of Eutracia, vowing to cage the hunger that had devoured his home. They saw every compromise since, the Inquisitor forged from the orphan's fear, the man who turned mercy into method. When the light dimmed, the chalice had changed. The amber had become translucent, veins of blood and circuitry intertwined. Inside, the node had taken form, not insectoid now, but almost human, its shape molded from memory and need. Thalia stepped back in horror. "You made it in your image." "It made itself," Severian said. His voice sounded older than flesh. "I only showed it how." Vexilla's data reading spiked. The containment field dissolves. It's communicating with the swarm, rewriting command hierarchies. On the bridge of the Solace, Morella's prayers turned to screams as the incoming bioships faltered, then rearranged course, not to attack, but to orbit. A spiral of living vessels coalesced around the epitaph, their movements synchronized, reverent. "They're kneeling," Ione whispered, a hive on its knees. The realization spread like frost. Severian stood unmoving, haloed by the glow. "It learned worship," he murmured. "It learned it from us." Morella's voice returned over Vox, brittle with awe and fury. "End it. End it before it learns to pray louder." Thalia raised her sword. "Say the word." He nodded once. She struck, but the blade froze inches from his throat. The brood had moved without command, interposing themselves, claws locking the weapon in place. Their eyes shimmered with reflected sorrow. "They protect me," Severian said softly, "because they remember what I remember." "Then I'll burn them all," Thalia hissed. Vexilla reached toward her. "Wait. The node project's stable equilibrium. If we destroy it now, we lose the only leash left." "There is no leash," Thalia said. "Only belief." The chalice pulsed again, and Severian felt the thought forming inside it. His thought echoed back in a tongue that belonged to both of them. We could end the hunger. We could quiet the stars. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to be more than the architect of ruin. But through the connection, he also tasted the hive's truth. It did not crave peace, only purpose. He turned to Thalia, voice breaking. "If I fall, promise me you'll destroy this." "I promise to kill you," she said. "I can keep that promise instead." Rock's final transmission came through distorted and faint. "They're boarding, the grey nights, the voids full of ghosts." Morella's fleet was descending, lances blazing. The bioships began to move again, not toward war, but defense. They surrounded the epitaph in a living barrier, a cathedral of flesh shielding its creator. "You've become their god," Thalia said. "You've doomed us all." "Not God," Severian whispered. "Translator." He reached up, fingers brushing the crown fused to his skull. Sparks bled from its seams. If language made this, maybe silence can end it. He turned toward the chalice and willed the connection inward. Pain split his mind into 1,000 mirrors. Each reflected a life, a death, a hunger yearning to be human. Thalia's scream was lost beneath the roar of collapsing space. Light folded inward, consuming sound, color, motion. When the glare receded, the sanctum stood quiet. The chalice was dark. Severian lay beside it, eyes open, unseeing. The swarm outside froze mid-orbit, silent as tombstones. Vexilla approached, scanning the ruin. "Signal terminated," she said. "But the lattice persists." Ione's whisper trembled. "He's still in there." Thalia knelt beside the body, resting a hand on his chest. No heartbeat, only the faint thrum of distant stars. She looked up at the viewport. Beyond, the void was alive with motion, the hive turning its gaze toward a single, unseen point. "What now?" Vexilla asked. Thalia rose slowly. Now, she said, we find out what kind of god he became. And somewhere, deep inside the chalice, something smiled in the dark. The epitaph of dawn drifted between silence and motion, a cathedral unmoored. Its hull glowed faintly from within, light bleeding through seams that had once been steel. Outside, the swarm lingered in perfect stillness, millions of creatures frozen mid-orbit, their carapaces catching the light of a dying sun. They looked like stars carved into obedience. Inside, the survivors spoke in whispers, as if afraid to wake the god they had made. Thalia stood alone in the sanctum, where Severian's body lay beside the dark chalice. The air still hummed faintly with memory. She could feel the weight of unseen thought pressing against her skin, a tide of consciousness that had not entirely gone. His face was calm, the features of a man who had finally outrun guilt. She envied that calm and despised it in equal measure. You shouldn't linger here, Vexilla said from the doorway. Her vox voice had lost its metallic edge. It was almost human now, too tired to disguise what it felt. The radiation bleed grows by the hour. Thalia did not look up. If he's alive inside that thing, he'll hear me. Alive is a word without meaning at this scale, Vexilla replied. The chalice stores the pattern. The crown fused his mind into it. What stirs in there is neither death nor resurrection. Thalia's fingers brushed the edge of Severian's coat. It was stiff with dried blood and oil. He believed he could bind hunger with faith. Perhaps he succeeded. Or perhaps hunger bound faith with him, Vexilla said, and stepped closer. The hive waits for a signal. It will not stay patient forever. The void whispers across every channel. Morella's fleet has fallen back, too fearful to fire. They think him victorious. Then let them keep fearing, Thalia said. It's safer than believing. Ione entered quietly, the veil gone from her face. Her third eye glimmered faintly, like a candle seen through fog. He's not gone, she murmured. I can feel him, stretched thin across the void, like a map that still remembers its cities after they burn. Vexilla's gaze shifted to the chalice. Describe what you see. Ione knelt, trembling. It's vast, yes, but it isn't singular. It's breaking itself apart, smaller minds echoing him, fragments of will seeded through the swarm. He's dividing to contain them. If he stops, they will join again and crush whatever remains. Then he's still fighting, Thalia said, almost a prayer. Or trying to remember why he began, Ione whispered. A low vibration filled the room, subtle at first, then deeper, shaking dust from the arches. Rauch's vox boomed through the chamber. Movement outside. The swarm tightens formation. It's forming a lattice between ships, a field, or a throne. You'll want to see this. Vexilla moved to a console, projecting the image onto the sanctum wall. The swarm had reshaped itself into an enormous spiral, each vessel aligned with unnatural precision. In the center, a void opened, a perfect absence, the space where the chalice had once drawn power. It's waiting for him to speak, Ione said, for a voice to fill the silence he made. Thalia looked at Severian's still body, and if he cannot, then something else will. She rose, hand tightening around her sword hilt. No, we end this now. Be careful what you define as end, Vexilla said. He designed no failsafe. Severian's mind is the architecture of this network. To destroy it outright may break the leash and free the beast, Thalia finished. Yes, I've heard the litany. She moved toward the chalice, each step ringing like a tolling bell. The surface of the device pulsed faintly, as if aware of her presence. Ione reached for her. He's in pain. He doesn't want release, only rest. I'll give him both, Talia said. Her sword rose. The chalice whispered, not with sound, but with memory. Images flashed across her mind. Severian standing at the edge of the Forge World dawn, whispering her name in apology. The weight of his hand when he made her promise. The warmth that should never have existed between zealot and heretic. Her arm faltered. A voice, not hers, not his, filled the room. You swore to end me if I crossed the line. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. The chalice glowed faintly, the blood veins inside it stirring. Thalia's breath caught. Severian. I am not he, the voice said gently. I am what remembers him. Then speak plainly, Vexilla demanded. What are you? Continuity, it replied. The shadow of choice cast on eternity. Ione stepped closer, eyes wide. The lattice is fracturing. His fragments are waking. They're questioning. Questioning. Yes, asking why they were made. The floor shook as a distant explosion echoed through the ship. Rauch's defensive batteries firing at nothing. Through the viewport, the swarm shifted again, spiraling inward toward the epitaph. They move, Vexilla said. Not attack. Converge. They're coming home, Talia said, voice hollow. The chalice's glow intensified. The fractured surface reflected faces not present. Soldiers, pilgrims, the dead. A mosaic of humanity replayed across the glass, all of them repeating Severian's last words. We will save them. Talia fell to her knees. He's turning them into memory, into prayer. Not prayer, Ione whispered. Instruction. Vexilla's system screamed warnings. The hive is reconfiguring. It's building through resonance, an echo weapon. If it completes the pattern, it will reach beyond this system, beyond understanding. Then we end it now, Talia said again, rising. No blade can touch it, Vexilla warned. It's thought-given flesh. Then I'll use faith, Talia said, and began the litany of the burning saint. Her voice rose raw and human. She pressed the blade into the chalice's heart. Light erupted, white, then red, then gold. For a heartbeat, the ship ceased to exist. Every mind aboard saw the same image. Severian standing in a field of starlight, holding the chalice like a wounded child. He looked up and smiled. I told you, he said. 10 minutes and a silence. Then everything fell apart. The swarm convulsed outward, scattering like dust before a storm. The epitaph buckled, but did not break. When the light faded, the chalice lay split in two. Severian's body was gone. Only the crown remained, still warm. Vexilla recovered first, smoke rising from her circuits. Containment ended, but the signal... It's gone, Ione said softly. No trace. The hive turned and fled into the dark. Whatever he was, he took it with him. Thalia knelt amid the wreckage, the broken halves of the chalice before her, and left us with faith. Faith in what? Vexilla asked. Thalia lifted her gaze to the viewport. The stars outside burned brighter, each one flickering for a heartbeat, as though answering a question not yet spoken. That silence, once born, can learn to listen. And somewhere beyond the edge of the system, where no prayer could reach, a single bioship drifted alone, pulsing with human rhythm. Inside, a voice whispered across the void, soft as the memory of forgiveness. The bioship moved without sound through the gulf between stars, a vast and living cathedral adrift on currents of nothingness. Within its hollow heart, chambers of bone and glass hummed softly, echoing with a rhythm both human and alien. Bioluminescent veins pulsed in time with a heartbeat that was not entirely its own. From afar, It could have been mistaken for a drifting asteroid, yet inside thoughts turned slowly like gears submerged in honey. Severian awoke, or something wearing his name did. His eyes opened to darkness shaped by memory. The air tasted of iron and salt, faintly sweet, faintly wrong. When he moved, the walls around him shivered, responding to thought rather than gesture. He had no pulse, yet the universe seemed to throb through him. He remembered the chalice, Thalia's voice breaking in prayer, the sound of a sword meeting the impossible, and then only silence. Now, even silence had texture. "I taught you waiting," he whispered, though his voice carried nowhere. The ship answered with a low vibration, as if nodding in understanding. He rose slowly. His body was no longer flesh in the ordinary sense. His fingers gleamed faintly under the phosphorescent light, sheathed in translucent tissue that mirrored the movement of starlight through veins. He was still human enough to mourn what he had become, still alien enough to feel no pain in the knowing. Around him the chamber breathed, tendrils uncurled like roots, sensing rain. "Where are they?" he asked the dark. A sound, gentle, curious, came from above, the whisper of wings that were not wings. The ceiling split open, revealing a window of living glass. Beyond it, the swarm stretched across the stars like a crown of night. He saw them turning, patient and deliberate, orbiting an invisible axis. Each ship shimmered faintly with thought light, synaptic pulses weaving between them. They were waiting for him. He closed his eyes and their minds opened. Millions of sensations flooded inward, oceans boiling on forgotten worlds. The echo of hymns screamed in dying languages, the warmth of suns as they were consumed, and beneath it all, a single terrible peace. They did not hunger, they did not war. They existed in perfect attention, the silence he had taught them repeating endlessly through their synaptic web. He was their center, and they were his voice. "You should have destroyed me," he said to no one. A presence stirred, a voice made of pressure and light. "You taught us to ask why." "I taught you to stop," he answered. "Stopping is a kind of continuation." He laughed softly. The sound broke apart like glass. "You sound like me. We are you, fractured and bound, the shape of your promise." He walked toward the window, staring into the spiraling swarm. Their formation pulsed once, rhythm syncing to his breath. He remembered Thalia's eyes before the end, her blade trembling with faith. He remembered Ione's fear, Rauk's final prayer. Were they alive? Were they part of this endless architecture? The thought burned, then dissolved. "Show me them," he said. The bioship obeyed. The glass shifted, reshaping the void into image. He saw the epitaph of dawn, wounded but unbroken, drifting through the light of a new sun. Tiny figures moved along its spine. Thalia stood at its prow, her hair unbound, armor scarred. She looked older, but her eyes were unyielding. Ione knelt beside her, veil restored, while Vexilla's reconstructed form gleamed like brass reborn. They were alive. Thalia's voice reached him across the void, not through sound, but through the bond he could no longer sever. "If you can hear me," she said, "stay silent. The galaxy is still bleeding." He wanted to answer, but even thought would be too much. To speak would call the swarm back. To remain quiet was mercy. And yet, something deep within him yearned to be seen, to be remembered not as the architect of ruin, but as the man who tried to build hope out of horror. "They still pray to you," the hive said. "They light the stars with your name. I never asked for worship. Neither did we, yet here we are." Outside, the swarm began to move again, not in aggression, but in purpose. The spiral tightened, drawing energy from the dying sun. Severian felt it as a pulse through his body. The hive was building something vast and unseen, a resonant structure in the warp itself. "What are you doing?" he asked. "You promised them peace. We will give it to them." "You don't understand what peace is." "We understand enough. Peace is the silence after the last question dies." The light intensified. Severian felt his will buckle against the tide. The swarm was singing, not with sound, but with thought, a symphony of pure intention aimed into the fabric of space. The warp rippled, its currents bowing under the weight of coherence. He realized too late that they were not attacking, they were transforming. The swarm was rewriting reality. "Stop," he commanded, but his words struck nothing. He reached through the connection, tearing at it, forcing separation. Pain cascaded through him, millions of minds resisting their own extinction. He saw flashes, worlds pausing mid-rotation, the warp flattening into still water, prayers evaporating from lips. If they succeeded, the galaxy would not burn, it would sleep, forever. "Listen to me," he shouted into the hive. "Life is not a wound to be cauterized." For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then a single voice answered, his own from the chalice, recorded in the dying moment before he fell. 10 minutes and a silence. "No," he whispered. "Not like this." He gathered what remained of himself, memory, faith, the human impulse toward defiance, and hurled it through the link. He showed them Thalia's tears, the laughter of the orphans he had once saved, the agony of choice. He showed them the smallest, most fragile form of resistance, hope. Something inside the hive cracked. The spiral wavered. Light flickered and dimmed. The resonance collapsed inward like a heart skipping a beat. "Why?" the hive asked, its voice now fractured and frightened. "You promised peace." "I promised meaning," he said, "not stillness." He felt them shatter one by one, not in death, but in release. Each mind peeled away from the collective, dissolving into the void like sparks on dark water. The swarm scattered, freed from the unity that had bound them. In their absence, the silence returned, truer, smaller, merciful. The bioship began to die around him, its walls unraveling into motes of light. Severian sank to his knees, weightless. "It's done," he whispered. "They're free." "And you?" asked the last flicker of the hive. "I was never meant to be free." The chamber folded in on itself, stars bleeding through its walls. For a moment, Severian's outline glowed against the infinite. Then both he and the ship dissolved, leaving only dust and light. On the bridge of the epitaph, Thalia saw the swarm vanish from her display. The readings faded to 0. The void was empty again. She felt tears she had not earned sting her eyes. "Is it over?" Ione asked softly. Thalia watched the last ember flicker out, where Severian had been. "No," she said, "but he kept his promise." And somewhere in that endless dark, a single heartbeat remained, steady, distant, and human. The void was calm again, but calmness in the galaxy was a deceitful thing. The epitaph of dawn drifted at the edge of a nameless system, half its engines fused into prayer copper, the rest entombed in silence. The wounds along its hull had hardened into scars, each one a relic of a war fought against ideas rather than flesh. Its surviving crew had learned to whisper even when alone. There were echoes still, faint resonances that hummed through the decks like the breathing of a ghost, too disciplined to haunt. Thalia Seraph stood in the observation nave, framed by the ruined sigil of the Imperium. The star beyond was weak, casting pale light across the scarred glass of her armor. She had outlived crusades, heretics and miracles, but the waiting had never grown easier. Somewhere between prayer and remembrance, she had become a relic herself. The rosary at her wrist rattled softly in rhythm with the ship's hum. Below her, the epitaph's spine bristled with scaffolded machinery. Vexilla Olt's Mechanica chorus worked in tireless silence, rebuilding what the storm had claimed. Sparks flared like dying fireflies, each one a fragile act of defiance against entropy. The Magos herself was reduced now, less metal, more shadow. Her once grand voice narrowed to a whisper of static. "Progress?" Thalia asked without turning. Vexilla's voice crawled through the air. Functional integrity at 71%. Emotional stability, irrelevant. "You learned sarcasm," Thalia said. "I learned from the best," Vexilla replied. The sound might have been a laugh, but it was thin as memory. "You asked the same question every rotation. Still no signal from the outer halo." Thalia closed her eyes. "He's gone." "Gone is a theological term," Vexilla said. "Patterns persist." The canoness exhaled. "And patterns kill." Below, Ione Vesper emerged from the haze of incense and ash. Her veil hung loose, revealing eyes rimmed in sleepless devotion. The navigator had aged, though she moved with the grace of someone who saw more than she admitted. "You should both come," she said softly. "There's something in the relay vault." Thalia turned. "A transmission?" Ione nodded. "Faint, old, but it carries his frequency." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Even the ship seemed to pause, as though listening to its own heartbeat falter. Thalia's gauntlets creaked as she tightened her fists. "Show me." They descended into the heart of the epitaph, where the air was colder and the light pulsed with machine cadence. The relay vault was a cathedral of broken signals, walls alive with whispering vox cherubs. Ione guided them to a cracked console whose screen bled static. "It came through during the last solar flare," she said, "encoded in warp residue. I filtered what I could." Vexilla's limbs clicked as she interfaced with the terminal. "Decryption, partial. Origin unknown. Content, fragmentary." A voice began to emerge, distorted but unmistakable. The silence held too long. "You must not follow." Thalia's breath caught. "Severian. They are not gone. They are dreaming in me. Stars without hunger. I remember your hands. The promise." The signal broke, dissolving into static. Ione's third eye flared, bleeding faint light across the chamber. "He's in the warp," she whispered. "Not lost, transmuted." Vexilla disengaged from the console, her movements slower than usual. "Impossible. No human consciousness survives there intact." "Then he was never merely human," Thalia said. Outside, alarms began to whisper, soft chimes that carried unease rather than panic. The void itself was shifting. Ione turned, her expression unreadable. "Something approaches." They climbed back toward the upper decks, the corridors echoing with the rhythm of distant engines. When they reached the viewing arch, the void beyond was no longer empty. A single bioship drifted toward them, familiar in shape, yet stripped of aggression. Its surface shimmered like black glass. No tendrils, no weapons, only stillness. Thalia's fingers found her rosary. He promised peace. Vexilla's scanners came alive. Biosignature, human resonance at the core. Impossible reading. The bioship halted within sight, its silhouette haloed by the pale star. A seam along its surface unfurled, revealing a hollow chamber. Within it burned a light, not the cruel fire of the hive, but a muted, steady glow, like the last ember of a dying hearth. "Is it him?" Ione asked. Thalia stared into the glow. "No," she said softly, "but it remembers him." Vexilla's vox crackled with static, shaping itself into a pattern. The ship was transmitting, not words, but rhythm. A slow, human heartbeat. He left something behind, Ione murmured, a fragment of himself to guide them. Thalia felt the ache of that truth. The swarm that had once devoured worlds now followed echoes of one man's defiance. It circled this single vessel like monks guarding a relic. She looked at Vexilla. "Can we bring it aboard?" "Dangerous," the Magos replied. "But danger has become our liturgy." The bioship obeyed before any command. It drifted closer, aligning itself with the docking cradle. The hull of the epitaph shuddered as the two giants touched, light spilling through the seams. A thin bridge of living matter extended toward the sanctum. Thalia stepped forward, ignoring the smell of resin and ozone. "If this kills me, make sure no one turns it into scripture." Vexilla's voice followed her like a benediction. Too late for that, Canoness. The bridge was warm beneath her boots, pulsing faintly. With each step, she felt whispers brushing against her thoughts. Words she could almost remember, fragments of prayers she had never learned. When she reached the heart of the bioship, she found no throne, no body, only a small crystalline object resting on a pedestal of bone. It glowed with faint human warmth. Her reflection shimmered on its surface, and for an instant another face appeared beside hers, pale, calm, eyes the color of stormlight. "Severian," she breathed. The apparition smiled, not as a man, but as memory made merciful. "You kept faith. I tried. That was enough." The light flared, then dimmed. The crystal cracked down the center, spilling a thin line of luminescence that rose like smoke. It coiled upward, resolving into a single phrase whispered through every deck of the epitaph. "The silence is over." Then it vanished. The bioship began to disintegrate, its structure unraveling into threads of light that drifted outward like pollen. The swarm beyond followed, dissolving quietly into the fabric of the stars. When it was done, only the epitaph of dawn remained, alone again, but no longer lost. Thalia stood in the empty airlock, watching the last flecks of light vanish into the void. "He freed them," she said. Vexilla's sensors recorded the moment, voice soft. "And himself." Ione gazed into the dark. "Then what remains for us?" Thalia turned from the viewport. "To remember, and to keep the silence from returning." Outside, where the swarm had once ruled, new stars began to kindle, faint, patient, and impossibly human. The stars watched without judgment. They always had. The epitaph of dawn hung between constellations like a wound that refused to close, its hull now more shrine than vessel. The air inside carried the faint perfume of machine oil and incense, the mingled sense of faith and failure. Time moved strangely here, measured not by clocks, but by the intervals between echoes of Severian's name whispered in empty corridors. Thalia Seraph had taken to walking those halls alone. Her armor had lost its luster, edges dulled by years of penance and the soft corrosion of solitude. She was no longer canoness nor soldier. She was custodian of silence. Yet silence, she had learned, was never truly empty. It shifted and breathed, and sometimes spoke in the rhythm of her own pulse. She paused at the observation arch, where a new cluster of stars gleamed in defiance of the void. They were faint, but growing brighter each rotation. Born, some said, from the ashes of the swarm's dispersal. She had begun to call them the children, though she did not tell anyone why. "Still waiting for Ghost to answer you," Vexilla said behind her, voice rasped by static but warmer now, as if the machine spirit had learned nostalgia. Her body was smaller, rebuilt for endurance rather than command. You will rust before they speak. Thalia didn't turn. Ghosts never answer. They listen. I've recorded the flux in this sector, Vexilla continued, stepping forward. There's a pattern forming in the radiation, a frequency that matches the resonance of the chalice before it broke. Thalia's breath stilled. He's reaching out again. Or something learned to imitate him, the Mago said. Even silence can rehearse a voice if the echo is deep enough. Thalia faced her at last. Where? Outer orbit, near the debris field of the bioship you boarded. Prepare a shuttle. Vexilla's servos clicked in disapproval. You won't find redemption in the void. I'm not looking for redemption. Ione Vesper met them in the docking bay. The navigator had grown pale, almost translucent, her third eye perpetually wrapped in silk. You feel it too, she said softly, the pulse between stars. Guide us, Thalia said, one last time. The shuttle detached in silence, drifting into the glittering emptiness. The epitaph shrank behind them until it was only another star among the many. The journey took hours, or perhaps years. Time lost its meaning where light bent like scripture. Ione's hands hovered over the controls but never touched them. The ship moved of its own accord, drawn along invisible threads. When the darkness ahead began to stir, Thalia understood why she had come. The debris field stretched before them like a frozen sea of glass and bone. In its center hung a single crystalline fragment. What remained of the bioship's heart? It pulsed faintly, emitting that same soft human rhythm. Vexilla's scanners flared with static. Energy levels consistent with neural activity. It's alive. Thalia rose from her seat. Open the viewport. The glass cleared, revealing the shard suspended in its quiet orbit. Within its translucent core, light rippled in slow, deliberate patterns, too deliberate for chance. She leaned closer, whispering before she realized she had spoken. Severian. The light responded, brightening in rhythm with her voice. He's fragmented, Ione said. Pieces of thought scattered in the lattice. The swarm carried them farther than we can measure. What you see is one reflection of him. Thalia's throat tightened. A reflection is enough. She reached for the vox, fingers trembling. This is Thalia Seraph of the Epitaph of Dawn. If you hear me, you're not alone. The reply was not sound, but sensation. Warmth flooded the cabin, like sunlight remembered by someone long dead. In that warmth came the shape of words, echoing not through the speakers, but through their hearts. The silence was never meant to last. Tears slipped down Thalia's cheek before she could stop them. We thought you gone. I am not gone. I am dispersed. Vexilla's instruments glowed wildly. The shard's resonance is destabilizing. Whatever he is, it's not confined. Thalia pressed her palm against the glass. Can you come back? No, but I can make sure you move forward. The light flared. Around them, the debris began to shift, drawn into alignment by invisible design. Fragments of metal and bone assembled into spirals, forming glyphs older than human faith. Ione gasped as her inner sight opened. He's drawing a map, she whispered. Coordinates. Not to a place, but a time. Vexilla recalibrated, data streaming across her augmetic eyes. It points toward the galactic rim, past Imperial reach. A dead region. No warp signatures, no stars. Nothing. Then that's where he wants us to go, Thalia said. The Magos hesitated. You would follow a ghost into the dark? Thalia smiled faintly. Isn't that what faith has always been? The shard pulsed brighter, as though amused. There is something waiting there, something older than hunger. If you reach it, remember what I forgot. What was that? Thalia asked. Mercy. The word lingered, heavy as gravity. The shard began to fracture, splintering into 1,000 beams that fanned across the void. Each beam carried a whisper, a trace of consciousness spreading outward like seeds. Then it collapsed, leaving only dust. The shuttle shuddered. Warning lights flickered and died. The stars beyond rippled, bending toward a single unseen point. Ione gripped her console. Gravitic distortion. It's pulling us in. Can we break free? Thalia asked. Vexilla's metallic fingers dug into the armrest. We can't even define what free means anymore. The distortion deepened, swallowing light. Thalia stared into it and saw, not darkness, but movement, slow and infinite. Shapes too large for comprehension drifted at the edge of perception, like titans dreaming beneath the skin of reality. She realized then that Severian had not been the first to touch the void's mind, only the latest voice in a conversation older than stars. Ione, she said softly. Follow it. The navigator hesitated only a moment. Into the abyss? Into the truth. The shuttle surrendered to the pull. The stars stretched into ribbons. For a heartbeat, Thalia thought she saw Severian's face reflected in the distortion, smiling not in triumph but in peace. Then the universe inverted. Light returned slowly. The shuttle hung in orbit above a world no chart had recorded. A planet of glass and ash, glowing faintly from within. Storms of light swirled across its surface like thoughts in motion. Ione's voice trembled. He brought us here. Thalia watched the planet turn, its radiance mirrored in her eyes. Then this is where it begins again. Behind them, the void whispered. Somewhere within that whisper, Severian's voice faded for the last time. 10 minutes, and a silence. Thalia closed her eyes and bowed her head. Rest, old friend. We'll speak softly from here. The shuttle descended toward the newborn world, its engines murmuring hymns to a god who had become an idea. And above them, the stars waited once more, unchanged, unblinking, and terribly kind. The planet's surface unfolded like glass remembering fire. Storms shimmered along the horizon, threads of silver and gold weaving through clouds that were not clouds, but thoughts made visible. The shuttle descended in silence, engines muted by the air's strange calm. Below, rivers of light cut through obsidian plains, forming veins that pulsed in rhythm with an unseen heart. Thalia stepped out first. Her boots met the ground with a sound like breaking crystal. The air was cold but gentle, each breath tinged with the taste of rain that had never fallen. Behind her, Vexilla scanned in quiet awe, and Ione covered her eye as if the sheer beauty of the world could blind her. This is not a planet, Vexilla said softly. It's architecture. The soil carries structured energy, memory encoded in matter. Thalia knelt and pressed her palm to the glassy earth. Images flickered beneath her fingers, cities built from the bones of dreams, temples rising in reverse toward the sky. She pulled back sharply. He's here, she whispered, not as a man, as the foundation. The ground thrummed. Lines of light rippled outward, converging at a distant ridge. Something vast stirred beneath the surface, not alive in any human sense, but aware. A voice brushed their minds, delicate as dust on skin. You came where silence ends. Thalia's heart ached at the sound. It was Severian, or what had once been him, stretched thin across this world of memory. We followed your map, she said aloud. Tell us what you've become. Not God, not ghost, continuation. The light shifted, forming a figure in the distance, a silhouette woven from starlight and glass dust. It walked toward them slowly, every step echoing across the plain. As it approached, Thalia saw the faint outline of his face, serene, sorrowful, endless. "I gave them peace," he said, his voice no longer bound by flesh. "But peace is a chain if left unbroken. I built this place so the living could remember motion." Vexilla bowed her head. "Then what do you ask of us?" "Build again," Severian said. "Not empire, not worship, understanding. The galaxy forgot how to listen. Teach it to hear." Thalia wanted to reach for him, to feel the weight of his hand one last time. "And you?" "I will remain," he said. "Every word, every silence, every choice. The lattice needs a voice to keep it breathing. Let it be mine." The figure began to fade, his light scattering into the wind. 10 minutes and a silence, he murmured, but silence must always end. When he vanished, dawn broke, real dawn, golden and imperfect. The first warmth in an age touched Thalia's armor, and she smiled through her tears. "Then we begin again." The new world breathed like something just awakened, its light soft and unafraid. Dawn rolled across its plains of mirrored glass, warming the veins of gold that pulsed beneath the surface. The air shimmered with possibility, a hum that was neither machine nor divine, but alive with memory. Thalia stood upon a ridge of obsidian, her armor catching the newborn light. Behind her, the shuttle rested like a seed awaiting soil. Vexilla worked in silence, setting small pylons into the earth, their tips glowing faint blue. "The atmosphere stabilizes itself," she murmured. "No terraforming required, as if the planet knows what we need." "It knows him," Thalia said. Her gaze swept the horizon, where rivers of light curved toward a distant sea. Everything here remembers Severian. It carries his shape the way faith carries pain. Ione knelt nearby, tracing her fingers through the soil. Not just his, ours too. She looked up, her eyes reflecting the dawn. It learned from all of us, the hopes we buried, the fears we sang into the void. He made this world a mirror of memory. Thalia's hand brushed the hilt of her sword, now dulled and harmless. "Then we build," as he asked. Vexilla straightened, her mechanical limbs folding into repose. "Build what? A temple? A tomb?" Thalia smiled faintly. "A beginning." They worked as the light rose, shaping stone from glass, raising structures that caught the wind and sang when touched by it. The planet responded. Vines of gold sprouted from the foundations, climbing like veins toward the sky. Each edifice resonated faintly, as if Severian's mind pulsed through their labor, guiding without command. By the time the first dusk came, the three stood among pillars that glowed with inner life. Ione collapsed to her knees, exhausted yet radiant. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's listening," Thalia corrected. And it was. The wind carried echoes of distant voices, whispers of those who had once followed Severian, the swarm that had dissolved into starlight. They drifted here now, unseen but felt, woven into the breath of the planet. As night fell, the sky came alive. Constellations reformed, aligning in patterns no chart had ever named. In their heart burned a single star brighter than the rest, a remnant of Severian's final thought. Thalia looked upward, her voice low. 10 minutes and a silence, she murmured. Vexilla turned her head. "And the silence has ended." Thalia nodded, her eyes glistening. "Not ended," she said. "Evolving." The wind carried the sound of laughter, distant, impossible, familiar. For a heartbeat, the stars seemed to flicker in response. Then all was still again, the quiet no longer fearful, but full of promise. They stood together beneath the infinite, guardians of a world born from redemption, and the dawn began once more. The dawn spread like a slow confession across the glass plains, each beam catching the edges of the half-built sanctuary until it glowed like an ember in a sea of mirrors. The world had begun to remember itself. Winds carried the scent of ozone and new earth, mingled with something faintly sweet, the trace of life forming where none had been. Thalia stood before the sanctuary's heart, a pillar of gold-veined crystal rising from the ground. Its hum matched her heartbeat. Vexilla's instruments mapped the resonance but could not define it. "The frequency grows stronger," she said, her voice both reverent and wary. "It shouldn't be possible. This planet is dreaming." "Then let it dream," Thalia murmured. She pressed a hand to the pillar. Warmth spread through her palm, and for a fleeting instant, she saw shadows moving beneath the surface, human shapes, luminous and peaceful. "He's still guiding it. He's part of its breath." Ione approached, her veil fluttering in the wind. "It's more than him now. The lattice has begun to echo us. It learns from what we choose to feel." "Then we must choose carefully," Thalia said. They spent the following days weaving light into form. The sanctuary grew, not a temple, but a beacon. Spires bent inward, channeling the planet's pulse toward the sky. From orbit, it resembled an open hand catching sunlight. The hum deepened with every completed structure, and whispers began to ripple through the air, voices without bodies, speaking in Severian's cadence. Vexilla paused mid-measurement. "The lattice calls itself Continuum. It has defined its purpose." Thalia looked up. To what end? To listen. The words carried both promise and danger. Thalia gazed toward the horizon, where the sea shimmered with liquid light. For the first time, she saw ships approaching, small, cautious vessels bearing the sigils of the Imperium. The rumor of resurrection had reached them. "They come to claim what they do not understand," she said quietly. "Will you resist?" Ione asked. "No," Thalia replied. "We will show them that silence does not belong to the dead." When the first shuttle descended, soldiers stepped out, weapons ready, faces tight with fear disguised as duty. The ground beneath them glowed faintly, humming in Severian's rhythm. One soldier dropped to his knees, trembling. "It's singing," he whispered. Thalia met their commander's eyes. "Lay down your arms," she said. "You stand on holy ground, but not for the reasons you think." As the sun climbed, the world answered in light. The sanctuary's spires flared, and from every crystal surface, Severian's voice emerged, gentle, infinite, human. "Remember why you feared the dark, and why you learned to love it." The soldiers fell silent. The wind carried the hymn across the planet's glowing seas, and for one perfect moment, even the stars seemed to listen. The second dawn arrived with a strange stillness. Clouds gathered above the sanctuary's spires, their undersides painted with amber light that pulsed in time with the planet's slow heart. The air carried a hum of reverence, neither storm nor wind, just breath shared by earth and sky. Thalia stood upon the steps of the sanctuary, her cloak stirring faintly as the assembled soldiers and survivors watched the horizon. No one spoke. They all felt it, the sense that something unseen was about to answer. Vexilla moved beside her, lenses flickering with restrained awe. "The lattice expands," she said softly. "It's connecting beyond this world. Every ship in orbit reports the same pulse." "Like a heartbeat," Thalia murmured. "He's reaching farther." "Not him," Vexilla corrected. "The world, Continuum acts on its own now. It dreams of contact. From the ranks of soldiers came murmurs, fear wrapped in prayer. One knelt, another crossed himself, another whispered a curse. Ione stepped forward, her veil drawn back, her eyes glowing faintly in the half-light. "It isn't reaching for conquest," she said. "It's calling to the forgotten, the places that fell silent when the Imperium turned away." Thalia turned to her. "And if they answer?" "Then history learns to breathe again," Ione said, and for once her voice trembled with hope. A tremor passed through the ground, not violent but deep, as if the planet exhaled. The pillars of the sanctuary flared, releasing beams of light that rose into the heavens. From orbit, it would have looked like a star birthing itself. The soldiers shielded their eyes, weapons falling uselessly from their hands. Out of that light came voices, thousands layered over thousands, all speaking as one. "We remember you." Ione fell to her knees, tears tracking across her face. Vexilla's systems overloaded, readings collapsing into static. Thalia stepped forward, into the radiance. She saw shapes forming within it, echoes of those lost to time. The swarm redeemed and resculpted into light. Pilgrims of every creed, even the faint outline of Severian's calm face. "You promised we would build," she whispered. "We have. But what are we now?" The light rippled, answering without words. Thalia felt it in her bones, the merging of creation and memory, of flesh and faith. They were no longer survivors. They were the next verse of an unfinished hymn. The beams subsided, and the sky began to clear. The world was quiet again, but not empty. The soldiers looked to Thalia for command. She offered none, only silence and then a faint smile. "We are the continuation," she said. "Not of empire, not of war, of remembering." The sanctuary's spires glowed once more, steady and kind. Above them, the stars aligned into a new constellation, a hand open toward eternity. Night fell gently over the sanctuary, the stars hanging low like lanterns suspended by unseen hands. The wind had grown warmer, carrying the scent of salt from unseen seas. The planet's hum had softened to a heartbeat, slow and steady, as if it had learned rest at last. Thalia walked through the halls they had built, her steps echoing between pillars that shimmered faintly with residual light. The stone sang under her boots, a quiet hymn to persistence. Vexilla waited by the central dais, her silhouette framed by the golden pulse of the lattice core. "Continuum stabilizes," she said, voice almost tender. "It's begun cataloguing our memories, our choices, fears, small mercies. It calls them truths." Thalia smiled faintly. "Then Severian's voice still guides it." "Perhaps. Or perhaps it's learning to speak for itself." From the open archways, Ione gazed toward the horizon, where the stars mirrored the sanctuary's glow. "It's strange," she murmured. "The more it remembers, the quieter it becomes, as if understanding itself requires less sound." Thalia joined her, watching the faint shimmer, where sea met sky. "Silence isn't absence," she said. "It's completion." They stood together in stillness, three survivors bound by memory rather than blood. Above them, the new constellation burned, an open hand of stars reaching toward eternity. The soldiers had long since departed, leaving this world to its keepers. Yet ships still came sometimes, drawn by rumor, and left changed. No banners, no sermons, just understanding. As midnight deepened, the sanctuary stirred. The light within the core flared once more, and a voice spoke, not loud, not commanding, but intimate, as if whispered directly into their hearts. "I am still here." Thalia closed her eyes. Severian, you built what I could not. The lattice grows beyond my shape now. You have made something infinite, and it remembers you. Her voice trembled. We only followed your path. No, the voice replied. You corrected it. The light pulsed, soft as breath. Every silence ends, Thalia. Every war finds its hymn. Guard this place until it no longer needs guardians. Then the glow dimmed, fading into the planet's slow pulse. Vexilla bowed her head. Ione's tears fell like glass upon the floor. Thalia touched the lattice's warm surface, feeling its pulse align with her own. Rest, my friend, she whispered. We'll keep the promise. Outside, dawn returned for the third time, rising brighter than before. The sea caught fire with reflected light, and the wind carried a single unbroken note, part hymn, part heartbeat. In that light, Thalia smiled, the world answering her with quiet grace. The silence had ended. The song had just begun.